Pablo Ferro is a graphic designer and film title designer originally from Antilla, Cuba. He's most well known for his title design work on films such as Dr. Strangelove, The Thomas Crown Affair, Bullet, The Addams Family and Men in Black. He's also quite well known for his sartorial elegance and general fabulousness. Ferro's a self-taught animator. His first teacher was a book by Preston Blair, a former animator at Walt Disney Productions and the MGM animation department. Ferro began freelancing in the mid-1950s in the New York animation industry. He drew comics for Stan Lee and Atlas Comics, which later became Marvel Comics. And subsequently, Ferro became a darling of the Madison Avenue advertising world, which is so well represented in the series of Mad Men. During this time, he worked for top commercial studios, including Academy Pictures, Elektra Films, and Bill Stern Studios, where, among other things, he animated Paul Rand's drawings for El Producto cigars. In 1961, he founded the creative production studio Ferro Moggerbug Schwartz. A consummate experimenter, Ferro introduced the kinetic, quick cut method of editing, whereby static images, including engravings, photographs, and pen and ink drawings, were infused with speed, motion, and sound. In the late 1950s, most live-action commercials were shot with one or two stationary cameras. Conversely, Ferro took full advantage of stop-motion technology as well as shooting his own jerky footage with a handheld Bolex 16mm film camera. Unlike most TV commercial directors, Ferro maintained a strong appreciation and understanding for typography, such that in the late 1950s he pioneered the use of moving type on the TV screen. He had a preference for using vintage wood types and Victorian Gothic fonts, not only because they were popular at the time, but because they were vivid on television. After seeing Ferro's commercials, the director Stanley Kubrick hired him to direct the title sequence, end sequence, advertising trailers and teasers for Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb from 1964. Kubrick also convinced Ferro to resettle in London, where he was based. Dr. Strangelove was a biting attack on Cold War hysteria and fiercely lampooned the era's hawkish fanaticism, suggesting that the world was close to the brink of the unthinkable, nuclear war. The film's frightening absurdity was established in the very first frame of Ferro's main title sequence design. As the ballad Try Little Tenderness plays in the background, B-52 bombers engage in mid-air coitus with their refueling ships, underscoring the subplot that sexuality is endemic to human endeavour. Overlaid on these frames, the film's title and credits are full-screen graffiti-like scrawls comprised of thick and thin hand-drawn letters, unlike any movie title that had preceded it. Immediately after Dr. Strangelove, Ferro created the main title sequence for Basil Dearden's 1964 film Woman of Straw, starring Sean Connery and Gina Lollobrigida. This now forgotten film offered Ferro a unique opportunity to experiment with high contrast film that reduced all middle tones to solid black, which he then bathed through red filters. Ferro used intense close crops, overlays and in and out fades, focusing on a few symbolic elements: a wheelchair, a woman and a man, Sean Connery. By overlaying positive and negative images, Ferro created tension between the realistic and the abstract. And today, this technique is one of the most common conceits used as openers for dramatic TV series, but back in 1964, it was new to the silver screen. Ferro's next opening film title sequence didn't materialise until 1966, when Norman Jewison hired him for The Russians Are Coming. The Russians Are Coming is a Cold War comedy about a USSR invasion of America by a lone Russian submarine crew. Jewison wanted Ferro to devise a logo for the film that would somehow evoke Paul Revere's famous call to arms, "The British are coming." Ferro scoured type books for the most appropriate lettering until he found a Russian typeface where the R's were reversed. I mean, today this is a common trope, the reversal of different letters. But Ferro explained that for him, something was missing, and I quote, "I asked a friend of mine, the illustrator Charles B. Slackman. He suggested that I put a hammer and sickle in place of the G. After that, it was perfect." Ferro began designing the main titles as dueling Russian and American flags, fighting one another to occupy the screen. Using quick cuts punctuated by a vibrant soundtrack and a dominant bath of red over the huge screen, Ferro raised both the tension and expectation that expressed the film's comedic plot. Ferro's next title for The Thomas Crown Affair, also directed by Jewison in 1968, introduced multi-screen effects for the first time in any feature motion picture and defined a cinematic style of the late 1960s. Jewison had seen a Beech-Nut gum commercial in which Ferro used the multi-screen technique and wanted it done for his own title sequence for The Thomas Crown Affair. Yet towards the end of editing the movie, Jewison realised that the title and the film itself was much too long. He was desperately searching for a way to edit out as much as 20 minutes when Hal Ashby, the film editor on Thomas Crown, suggested that Ferro take a stab at editing a key sequence using the same multiple screen technique in order to speed up the narrative flow. Ferro, and I quote again, said, "Hal said, don't cut it out, cut it up." And this describes the novel way in which Ferro used contiguous frames to compress the action, which became the stylistic character of the film itself. Ferro cut a key scene known as the polo sequence into 20 or 30 simultaneous frames, reducing the time from 6 minutes to around 40 seconds. But in addition to compression, certain important character traits were brought out by the way in which Ferro designed and paced the multiple images on screen. By focusing in on clothes, for example, Ferro underscored the wealth and sophistication of the people in the specific scene. Steve McQueen, who starred in and produced The Thomas Crown Affair, hired Ferro to do titles for his next film, Bullet, which launched an uninterrupted 30-year string of title and trailer commissions for Ferro. Titles, however, are just one aspect of Ferro's movie-making interests.
You know what you can do with them dishes. And if you ain't man enough to do it for yourself, I'd be happy to oblige. I really would.
For his next film commission, the 1969 film Midnight Cowboy, directed by John Schlesinger, which is an amazing film and you should definitely watch all of it if you can, Ferro not only designed the main title sequence, but was second unit director and editor of the bedroom TV scene in which John Voight's character, a young Texan stud who wants to be a high-class gigolo in New York City, tries his hand as a male hustler and realises that this is not really his proclivity, so he beats up his client. The second unit director is responsible for shooting, establishing shots and other incidental material, and occasionally for directing scenes that don't employ the top stars. Ferro stumbled into this job when he realised that there was not enough usable original film footage shot in Texas to make a title sequence. And he needed to show the actor John Voight leaving his hometown to come to New York. So taking measures into his own hands, Ferro took a camera to the closest rural town he could find in New Jersey and shot additional footage, which he seamlessly edited in along with the original. Schlesinger was amazed that the new footage was so close, but as Ferro explains, and I quote, "I studied all the stuff that he, Schlesinger, did and put the shots in between that floated through so it looked like everything was shot in the same place." As a reward, Schlesinger gave Ferro the bedroom scene to direct on his own. And in this scene, a newscast plays on TV in the background, the content of which Ferro had to totally create from scratch.
Think Live, the new telephone fun game in our isolation booths.
Is it because I'm a stable hand?
1, 2, 1, 2, and rest.
Ferro gravitated towards filmmaking, but also directed trailers, including the intense trailer for A Clockwork Orange in 1972. And in this trailer, we can see that Ferro continues to rely on his quick-cut method to compress and enhance plot lines. The Clockwork trailer, though a perfect one-minute summary of Kubrick's disturbing adaptation of Anthony Burgess's book, was actually rejected by the studio because Ferro excerpted a pivotal rape scene from the film, which lasted just a split second of screen time, but which the studio head felt was in bad taste. Since the 1970s, Ferro has continued to do main titles for a litany of important directors, including Tim Burton, William Friedkin, Jonathan Demme, John Carpenter, Barry Sonnenfeld, Richard Benjamin, and his old assistant, Michael Cimino. And for such films as The Addams Family, Married to the Mob, Philadelphia, Mrs. Winterbourne, Good Will Hunting, and Men in Black. Ferro still, now, produces, directs, designs, and sometimes works with his son, Alan Ferro, on a range of different dynamic media. He's been widely recognised for his contributions to film and design, receiving the Chrysler Design Award, the Art Directors Club Hall of Fame Award, and the AIGA Medal. Ferro is also the subject of Richard Goldwich's 2012 documentary Pablo, which we'll leave you with now.
This is Pablo Ferro.
Bam! He got shot in the neck.
Pablo was on life support.
He was gonna die.
Hello.
He was that minister of the last rites.
The ground shifted.
May I have your attention,
It
please?
shifted.
We thought somebody was out to get us. We didn't know why.
May I have your attention, please? Thank you.
Who is Pablo Ferro? I had the feeling he was a bit of a gypsy.
It had to be an artist or somebody very strange.
Something about the essence of Pablo Ferro. He's like certain shamans, you know. He's a true artist.
He's like a walking work of art.
Somebody like that came over from Cuba when he was 12 years old and never wore shoes before. Came to New York City.
You have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes.
He was Kubrick's guy.
One of those guys that has a kind of a legendary aspect. Give it to Pablo and leave him alone for 2 weeks. He'll come up with something.
A big tribute is going on tonight for a Hollywood movie master by the name of Pablo Ferro. You may not know the name, but I bet you know the work.
Been in a movie theater in the past 40 years, you've seen Pablo Ferro's work.
The greatest credits ever seen on any film. I don't care what the budget was, what the film was. These are the great credits.
You've got to be crazy. This is as great as life gets.
This was Never Neverland, man. There was no time in Pablo's apartment. Sometimes he would just be there for days.
It was just like part of a scene of a movie.
This is Pablo Ferro.
Who was it? I just sitting on Pablo. You know what? It's okay for you to be gorgeous. Doesn't mean you have to be invisible.
The only thing you can depend on is that all things are going to change. The sooner you throw yourself into the sea of change, the better off you're going to be. You just roll along. You can't escape destiny.
Pablo who?